to our podcast show. So we started this recently. It's called First Name Basis, and we'll be sitting down with our TribalScale employees, special guests, to have an authentic and unscripted conversation on a variety of tech topics. So today you have myself, Rachel Wexler, the Director of Marketing at TribalScale, and Jane.
And you have me, Jane Motz. I'm the Director of Design at TribalScale. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
So today is a special episode on branding and the importance of branding for your company. We're going to be revealing TribalScale's new brand on September 12th, so stay tuned. But we wanted to give you a sneak peek into our journey of a rebrand today. So to kick it off, Jane.
I will kick it off. So, Rachel, why don't you talk to us a little bit why a company's brand is important?
Yeah, I actually just did a podcast about this entire subject of why branding and marketing is important, especially for tech startups when they first start out. One thing that I noticed when I came in is that our company was moving so quickly that we did not have a consistent voice or look or feel or messaging. So if you asked one person on the floor what we do, you got one answer. If you asked somebody else, you got another one. If one person was working on a one-pager and then it went somewhere else in another department, they looked completely different. So I think it's really important from the beginning to have consistency so there's no confusion on what your brand is. Definitely. But I also think that from the very beginning of a company, you have to see your vision in the future. Yeah. So that's something that I think that we do well because we have Sheetal leading us, and he's already living in a world with flying cars. Yes. But we really need to look at what the future of your company looks like and make sure that you basically are doing everything that ladders up into that overall vision. Absolutely. So if you're thinking about your brand, you're thinking about where you want that brand to be. Do you want it to be global? Do you want it to be local? Do you want it to be national or international? Do you want it to appeal to different verticals? And so taking all those things into consideration helps you build on that from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
What about you?
Important. Well, I mean, in terms of scale and growth, like one of the reasons why a company would choose to do a rebrand is internal disruption within the company, which is something that is a reality and has happened at TribalScale, at least in my 11 months being here, or no, actually, like longer. I was like over a year being here. If you have a change in value proposition or a change in audience, if you have a change in service offering, if you have any kind of change, it's one of the indicators that you need to take a look at your brand and make sure that it's satisfying both the needs of what you're articulating your service offering is, but also who you are as a company and what you stand for. And I know that when TribalScale got started in 2015, that it was only a handful of people. They only had a handful of clients, and they needed something in TribalScale fashion really quick to get up and going, to get the shingle out, to start generating that revenue. But over time, even in my tenure, going from being employee 77 to over 230 people, we're now a global organization. We have clients all over the world, and so for us, rebranding was important in that way. But for a company in general, if you have any of that internal disruption, or your organization your industry has been disrupted, the classic example is Airbnb, how they evolved their brand. Netflix, same idea. You rebrand so that you can meet the change of the market around you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so on that, how did you know, or how did we know together that TribalScale needed to rebrand? What were some of those signs?
Yeah, totally. Well, the brand that we had, and full transparency for the listeners, we struggled internally with our brand, right? Mm-hmm. Last summer we tried to refresh our brand. We tried to update it. We applied different colors. We iterated our logo.
Or even going back to the very beginning.
Oh, yeah.
The way that the company started was our 5 amazing co-founders sat, where did they sit? Rodney's Oyster House somewhere.
Yeah. It started in a bar.
It started in a bar with wine.
Yeah.
We also have wine. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It started in a bar, and they essentially said, we should call this company TribalScale, and they put TribalScale into a logo generator, and it popped out our logo, which we had for the first 2.5 years of our business. That's right. We, Jane and I kind of looked at it one day and said, we're now at a stage where we probably need to transform away from the logo-generated logo, although it did us wonders.
Not just that, we kept seeing our logo on every new crypto company that was being sprung up last summer. And so we said, okay, this logo generation company has generated our logo and probably our color for 16 or 17 different companies. And so it's time to rebrand. So we tried a brand refresh. And we weren't quite successful in getting it to the place where the design team and the founders were happy with it, and so that's what set us off on our journey to rebranding. And all of the things that I mentioned, like with the landscape changing, with our customer base changing, we knew that we needed to evolve ourselves and to disrupt, but also we wanted to really stand out from our competitors. There aren't a lot of companies that do things in the same way that TribalScale does. We would like to say that, you know, we are uniquely positioned in the marketplace for delivering the services and transformation and venture studios that we do. Knowing that we are unique, we knew that we needed a distinctive brand and something that was going to set us apart from other people who are kind of sort of like us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. And even from a marketing perspective, one of the things that I realized when I started here, so I think you said you were employee 77. I think you might be counting some chatbots in there. But if about a month later I started and I was employee 80, and now we're at 230.
Right. Yeah.
So fast forward a year and we've went from 80 to 230. So we really realized about 6 months ago that it was really important to kind of, we knew that growth and we knew what our targets were. We knew how many people we had to fill at our company in order to meet our services.
Yeah, exactly.
And we knew that it was the right time about 6 years ago. So I think knowing when to rebrand is all about timing as well. And if you see a massive growth path like we did, we kind of took a pause and made sure that we made this a priority at that time. So from a marketing perspective, for me, when I came in, like I said, you talk to one person on the floor about what we were, and if you were talking to one engineer who's worked on a mobile project for a year, we were a mobile agency. And if you talk to somebody else that was in Venture Studio, we are an in-house incubator. And so you went around and everybody had a different idea because they were working so fast in their own roles. So part of this was also to transform how our team worked together in a more collaborative way, and that meant understanding the whole picture of what our company is and where it's headed and what we're doing right now.
Absolutely.
And so that messaging piece was really important for me. The other thing is we have two massive audience. So we have our business development audience, but then we also have a recruiting audience, and both go hand in hand. We can't be elevating our business development without filling our staff to meet those needs. So we were talking to both audiences in a very different way, I thought, when I first joined. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were changing up our messaging, not just our design, to talk to both in one voice.
How uncommon is that, do you feel, that people have sort of their business speak and then their recruiting speak?
I think it's pretty common, especially when you're hiring at this level and this pace. With so many university students and co-op students, it's natural that you'll talk to a co-op student in second year university a little bit different than you would a senior SVP at a bank. So naturally that's going to happen, but the way that you talk about the company really shouldn't be any different, because A, we do the same thing no matter if you're working with us or for us, and B, we want to sound the same. So we want to sound like that fun company you want to work for, or that new kid on the block that you want to work with to elevate your business.
I think it all comes down to message architecture as well. Like you said, you surface different things depending on who you're speaking to and how it's supposed to resonate with the audience. But I think from a design perspective, you also want to have a different version, a more fun version of your brand that's more accessible and more relatable to, say, younger people if we're recruiting from university and college campuses, but also allow like workers of all age and stage to know and understand that TribalScale is a great place for them to invest time in their career in. Totally. And so, you touched on some of the reasons why that TribalScale is rebranding. What are some other reasons why you think that we decided to undertake the rebrand?
We had Kirsten Stewart join us as president and CRO in January.
January.
Wow.
Feels like a long time ago.
So we had her join in January, and having an outsider kind of start really, I think, completely shifted what we were doing. We were going back and forth, Jane and I working together, the marketing team, the design team. How can we work together? How can we do this in-house? And Kirsten came in, saw how many projects we had on the go, saw how many things the design team was doing, the marketing team was doing, the services side was doing, and said, this needs outside help. And so I think her coming in from a complete third-party perspective and realizing let's not try and do this ourselves. We have so much work on the go, and having an objective opinion both from her, but then also from an agency, I think was really a turning point.
Couldn't agree more. I remember those early initial conversations with Kirsten where I talked about the brand refresh and how the design team had tackled it in a couple of different ways, and some of our successes and some of our not successes or failures, and we both agreed, in the spirit that sometimes the cobbler's kids have the worst shoes. We knew that we couldn't take this on ourselves and deliver on our high quality, rapidly expanding design services side, and I knew the delivery team needed the designers to be accountable to the work, and so that's it's going and getting that outside help. Yeah. But man, was it great.
It was great. Yeah. So actually that's a good segue into the design process, or the whole process of our rebrand. So we started this together. Yeah. We finished it together.
We did.
Just very
Still
fitting.
Friends.
Yeah, exactly. But our first process was really picking the right partner.
That's right.
And so talk a little bit about how we started.
Yeah. So we spoke to all of our friends and stakeholders, right? We went deep. You and I have both shallow and deep career behind us, aging myself a little bit there, but we got a lot of advice from people, and we were very open and honest about our transparent need for help with the rebranding. So we met with a lot of different companies. We talked to a lot of different people about who we are and where we wanted to take the brand, and what it meant for us to, even engage a company and begin on this journey with somebody. And so after lots of fun meetings, I think, we wandered around town looking for help with our brand, and we settled in on a company where we knew we had not just a good culture fit, but they are geographically very close to where our office is, which made it easy to go and have meetings. And one of the things that impressed me most about OneMethod is just how much they understood us. Yeah. They really took the time to interview not just the founders and the executives and the leadership team, but to ensconce themselves into our office and our know and understand our work practices. And I feel like after we saw the first presentation of the brand house, that they really, really got us. Yeah. And I know it was a lot of interviews and a lot of market situation that they had to do in order to place TribalScale in the different spaces where we play and see where we were stacking up. That was part of it, but I know that the rigor that they put around to knowing and understanding our work, how we work, what it means to us, how we feel about it, what TribalScale means, what being part of this amazing company is, was really my moment when I went, okay, we're going to be okay. And by the time we saw the brand house, and as part of the larger brand story, that second or third presentation, I was really, really happy that we got with OneMethod.
Exactly. So if I had one word of advice for anyone thinking of a rebrand, there's amazing agencies out there, especially in Toronto, but go with the agency or the company that understands you. Yeah. So that was why we went with OneMethod in the end. Like Jane said, they're located directly across the street from us. We can literally look into their office, so that helped. But even more than that, they just understood us. They understood our vision, they understood our services, they understood our methods. Yeah. And so the fact that they just got it really helped the process, because we didn't feel like we had to have all these meetings explaining who TribalScale is. Yeah. They just got it.
Yeah. And because they took the time, but also it's a company of smart people who had done a lot of really innovative branding for a lot of different companies. And so it was a really good experience overall. And then in terms of just the branding process, it was very similar to any branding process that any designer would take on. It, of course, begins with generative and evaluative research. It then brings it into those creative explorations. And as they started exposing even just some of the language to us. And
the first part in this was that they took a deep dive. Yeah. So the marketing team handed over everything we've done in our 2 years at that point. We handed over every single piece of collateral, video, newsletters, social templates, everything we had. We gave it over to them, and they did a complete deep dive
into
and
that was the evaluative piece, right? And the design team did the same thing. Every logo, every structure of the logo, every version of the logo, so much of our design, things that we had done for external, on behalf of the marketing team, on behalf of ourselves, the takeover, branding, everything. It's kind of surrendering your deep dark secrets, opening up the closet and letting it all fall out. But it was a really good experience, and I think that's their rigor around that is what helped them know and understand us. Yeah. And then get our voice. When they started talking about, if your brand was a person, who would it be?
Who would it be, James?
Of course, it's Sheetal.
It's Sheetal.
Yeah. And so we would have good laughs about that. But they, then they would. It's the level of questions that they asked us in order to ideate all of the different types of nuances that they were able to put into the brand.
And to talk about process a little bit. So why we chose OneMethod is that they understood pair programming. Yeah. And even though they're not engineers, they understood the notion of pairing together. Yeah. And so they wanted to work with us. They didn't want, and it's very similar to what we do with our clients. We don't hand them a brief. And then they go away and work on it for a few months, and then they kind of show it to us in a big presentation. We were over there. I was over there 3 times a week. Easily. At the very beginning, for sure. Yeah. And in that process, we created a core team, which was Jane and myself, Kirsten and Mitch, I would say. I think so, yeah. And then we kind of championed our top 3 ideas together, and then we would show them to the larger leadership team. Yeah. So the way it worked was we just went over there and saw every step of the way. There really was nothing we weren't seeing.
The brand story took many, many different chapters, and we had exposure to it, as you mentioned, at every juncture, and that was really refreshing and very enlightening. I've done branding before in my career, but I've never been rebranded, part of a rebranding.
And we did talk about a potential name change, which is something that not a lot of people know, but we did explore, should we change names? I think that's also really important when you're at this stage of a company. 2.5 years, you've been around, you've definitely put your foot down, people know who you are. Yeah. Do you change your name? If you are, this is the time before you get even bigger. Yeah. But we explored it, and we obviously decided to stick with TribalScale. That's so right. You will see a new face of TribalScale, but still very much TribalScale. Yeah. On September 12th.
Yeah, and that was a fascinating process as well, even to, it's not, for the listeners who have children like I do, it's not unlike naming your kid. You at least for designers, you prototype and test and iterate until you have the final name. I had working theories for both my kids while they were still in utero, and we practiced calling them those names. And anyway, you probably want to edit that part out.
This is live.
Yes. Yeah. And so part of the brand story in the brand house was, going through each of those chapters and having them get to know not just the pairing culture here and all of the executives, their personalities, also in combination with the founders, getting to know and understand the floor. And I remember one day the OneMethod team showed up. They came to company stand-up, and then they started walking around the floor, and they came by the design pod, and as we were standing up, and I was like, oh, okay, OneMethod, come in. So we brought them into our stand-up, and they told us what they did yesterday, what they're doing today, and if they were blocked on anything. And it was pretty great, because what they were doing was a little bit of this and then a whole bunch of other stuff. Yeah. But it really immersed them into what we were doing. So yeah, it was interesting.
So we got a question. Yay. When is the new branding going to launch? Oh. So it is launching on September 12th. So that's the official date that we're going to be moving over. Exciting. We're talking about the potential of a design takeover. Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, we do a large takeover conference once a year, but we are bringing it global and potentially doing another one. So as TribalScale wants to show off our design chops, the first one will probably be our new rebrand.
Yeah, we're excited. Yeah, the design team is stoked to do it, and we've got some great work that we want to show. We've done some amazing client work already this year. There's so much more ahead of us, and the team has grown. You know, when I started here, there were 5 designers, and we were 17. You know, and just over all of the offices, and only growing, bringing on more people every month. So yeah.
And so we talked about what was great about our rebrand. Yeah. Which part of that was the best part for me actually was being with the leadership team, which is about 15 people, going over to OneMethod and them showing us their top 3 or 4 options for us in the end. Yeah. And we kind of had a moment where we kind of all closed our eyes and put our hand up, and we were pretty unanimous on the one that we chose. Yeah. So choosing the right partner and going through the right process, it took 6 months. So we started in February. We're just finishing now.
Oh my gosh,
it took a while, but if you do it right, then the alignment that happens in the end makes it a lot easier. Yeah. So that was our experience. So it really was great, but we did have some challenges.
We did.
So some of the challenges, especially when you have co-founders, and I've been through a few rebrands before where it was a co-founder-led company, it's emotional. Steering away, you know, we said that story and we were joking about the logo generator, but that was part of their story. That was how they started. They were, you know, that was part of why they're so emotionally attached to the company. And even though it was just a logo, the idea of moving away from that was really scary. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to talk about that a bit.
I mean, like surrendering the things that have served you for so long it's part of the human experience. And, you know, I was just reflecting that I was part of a rebrand at a company where we did it internally. And like it worked out very well. It was a bit more efficient because it was a smaller company and it was more like an update to an existing brand. But the challenge of doing something larger scale like this is the emotional attachment to the genesis story of how you got to where you are. And you mentioned that with the founders. So and also our founders are very opinionated. They have strong opinions.
Our whole team is.
The whole team is. Yeah, it's like it's why we've been so successful in business. And so I think you made a smart decision to keep the decision-making team small and throttle the choices so that there wasn't endless input and endless feedback loops from a larger team so that we could actually progress forward. So you know, strong personalities was definitely one. You know, making sure that we had divulged everything to OneMethod in terms of not just collateral that we had or information that we had, but also the pain points that we had.
We didn't hold anything back. We really got to know us. So maybe you should call them.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to know anything about TribalScale.
That's right. Yes. Thank you, everybody, our beautiful partners at OneMethod. So there's that was the logistical side of it. I touched on the emotional with the strong opinions and the surrendering of the genesis story, and then convincing everybody that you know, part of the ongoing story was going to be this change in brand, and that we kind of boldly had to face it and embrace it, and that was what was going to bring us into the future and be you know, be our face, you know, moving into this next phase of the company.
And so to jump in on that, so just what you can expect. So for people listening, what you can expect for our new face. It's bold, so it looks different. So that's what I would say is what our goal is to look unlike anybody that works in this space. Yeah. So that's really what our decision was, is that OneMethod put up a large screen of all the 4 final options, and we all went with the one that looked the most different when we were looking at all of our competitors and people in this space. Yeah. And that's really what we wanted to do. We feel different. We feel like our offering is different. We feel like there is no company out there that's doing what we're doing exactly. Yeah. And so we needed to have a brand that looked exactly like that. So that's what you can expect. And we do have another question.
Oh yeah, it seems like Tribal started branding early on in the company compared to other tech companies. Wow. We generated a logo, so that's a compliment, Pink Panda. Was this intentional? Well, it was intentional to get a brand out there.
And I think as far as a brand in the very beginning, it was definitely a voice. And that voice, as we joked, but it's real, is that voice was Sheetles.
Yeah.
Sheetles, our fearless leader, and he had a vision for this company that is not faltering, and it will never falter.
Yeah.
And so he knew what he wanted that to be from day one. And I think that's what's made our job, and probably OneMethod's job, a little bit easier, is that we know exactly where we're headed from day one. So I think if anyone, feels that we've had this brand, we have, because we've had this company that's a family. Everyone who works here, especially the leadership team, is so involved.
Yeah.
This is their home.
Yeah.
Both in work and in life sometimes.
We are a very functional team, and we have a great coach and a great leader in Sheetle, but we also have many leaders across the organization. I think there's player coaches all the way across the leadership team. And I guess one thing I've been meaning to ask you is, what are some of the tips for success when it comes to doing the rebranding for companies?
Yeah, so I've learned a lot through this process. Luckily, it was all good. Yeah. So my tips for success are 3 things. So we've kind of covered some of them, but my first one would be alignment. Alignment that, from whether it's co-founders or whether it's a leadership team, whoever the big stakeholders are, is that everybody's on board with rebranding. Yeah. And if they're not, which some of them weren't, we had a strongly worded meeting that was essentially, the people that knew best in marketing and design. We very carefully kind of discussed why it was important. And so if there wasn't anybody who was aligned, we had a conversation, and we came out of it all aligned. That this was time and it was the right thing to do. So alignment would be number 1. Number 2, third-party objective. So don't do it yourselves. It doesn't matter if you have the best design team, which we do, like Jane's 11, 17, how many people?
25, 60,000.
We have a global design team that is incredible, so it doesn't mean that they couldn't do this, but you need somebody who's looking from an outside perspective, because what ended up happening was our rebrand ended up being almost like a therapy session, I was calling it. So those first 2 months where we all sat down and really talked about what we do, where we're headed, what our offerings are, what companies we would love to work with, who our favorite clients have been, what our favorite projects have been, where we've failed, where we've really excelled. All of that was so important for our business and the actual function of our teams, completely aside from our rebrand. So I would say that because we had somebody that did it for us, we really were able to take a step back and figure out what it was we actually wanted, and we weren't invested. There was no emotions, there was no hard feelings. It wasn't us doing this ourselves. So second, get a third party, hire an agency. And third would be choose a core team. This is probably the most important. We have a team now of 230 very talented and opinionated in the best way possible employees, and it's impossible for everybody to be involved. We did involve, we were really very transparent throughout this time, so I had a few lunch and learns, gave everybody updates, which I think a lot of companies don't do. So bringing in your whole team so that they feel like they're a part of it, but then choosing a core team. So I think when I chose to do a small team of really predominantly myself, Jane, and Kirsten, we were then able to look at all of the iterations of it, champion 1 or 3 of our top choices together, and then bring that and then bring that to the larger team. That made all the difference, because we could have gone around and around in circles if we went and showed the top 20 to the whole big team. So the fact that we chose our top 3, and then everybody was choosing between a top 3 and then unanimously voted, we now have that alignment, which was the very first thing I talked about, which is that's really the most important thing.
And on your point too, having great material to choose from made it all that much easier. So when we started narrowing down from the top 20 or the top 10 to get to the top 5 or the top 3 that eventually serviced to the rest of the leadership team, it was a fantastic embarrassment of riches at the beginning to see all of the different ways that other people thought and understood and creatively manifested our company. I felt really humbled, actually, to see other designers rendering of what they thought our culture was and what it meant to be working for our company. And to me, that's maybe the UX in me, but also the person who's always been in media, to sort of see what other people think of who you are and what you do. It's like having your portrait painted.
Definitely, and liking all of them. Can you imagine? Taking headshots and liking all of them. That's what it felt like.
And those are great tips, and what a process and what a brand. I'm so excited for the whole world to see it. This was great, Rachel.
This was great.
Thanks so much.
Cheers, Jane.
Cheers. Clink.
They're plastic glasses,
plastic
or you'd be able to
glasses.
hear it.
See, we'll hold this up.
Thank you
Yeah.
for listening, and we will be back in about 2 weeks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.